Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight on February 18th, 2025, for our second of 2025's FGLI webinar series. Again, this is a professional development series aimed at supporting counselors who are supporting and serving any number of students in their caseload that identify as first gen, low income, or otherwise underrepresented in the college space. We're so excited to be touching on a bunch of different topics with you all. Also exciting to see some people in the comments. Yay. We're so excited to be touching on a bunch of different topics. Tonight, we'll be talking about supporting undocumented students, which I know is a very timely topic and something that's at the top of many counselors' minds right now. And so we're hopeful that tonight's webinar will be informative and answer some of the questions that you all have. Just some logistical background. Tonight's session is being recorded, and so you will get a copy of the recording and any associated resources that we talk about tonight in a follow-up email later this week. You can feel free to engage in the chat whenever a presenter kind of calls for it, and also use the Q&A function for any questions that might come up during the session. And we'll have a designated Q&A time later at the end of the session as well. Our lovely moderator for tonight, Rebecca, is going to drop a link to a Google form. If you've been here before, you already know that this form is to just provide a little bit of background on who you are and what you're looking for out of this webinar series, as well as any other College SA Guide webinars that are coming up in the future. Rebecca might also drop the webinar and live events website where you can see all upcoming events that are open to counselors, students, and any other populations that CEG is serving this year. Next month, we're going to have a session on college list building for first-gen low-income students. So things to look out for, some characteristics of a FGLI-friendly college or university. So we hope that you'll tune in for that as well. And I think that's all of the background information for tonight. So without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce tonight's presenter, Anna Martinez. Anna is absolutely wonderful. She's a college counselor at Columbia Secondary School for Math, Science, and Engineering, and an overall powerhouse when it comes to promoting student success and self-advocacy. So she has an amazing presentation set for us tonight. So I will go ahead and pass it over to Anna to start screen sharing and get into tonight's session. Thank you all for joining us again.
Hello, hello. Give me 1 second. Just figuring out aspect of this. That's not letting me.
Oh, I think we just made you co-host, Anna, so I think now you should be able to screen share seamlessly.
Y'all can see it, correct?
Yep, I think we're perfect. It's loading up now, but we can see your screen great.
Okay, perfect. So thank y'all, everyone. This is about supporting undocumented and mixed status families. So I'm gonna introduce myself, kind of introduce the context in which I've done this work. We're gonna do a little intro activity because we love those. Talk about creating an inclusive school community and college going culture, how to determine family citizenship status, going over some financial aid options, student scenarios, a reality check, just talking about what's like the current higher ed landscape when thinking about undocumented students or mixed status families, and then providing you with some resources. So who am I? I'm Ana Martinez. So my journey into college access started through La Vida Scholars, which is a organization that provides college access support to low-income students of color. I was part of La Vida Scholars in high school, very thankful for them. They are the reason that I enrolled and eventually graduated from Barnard College. After Barnard, I joined the NYU College Advising Corps. So the College Advising Corps is a national nonprofit that partners with local institutions and trains recent graduates as college advisors and puts them in under-resourced schools. So through the NYU College Advising Corps, I was placed at the American Dream School for 2 years. I worked directly for the American Dream School for 2 of the following years as their college counselor and then eventually as their college counseling chair. The American Dream School is a Title I dual language charter school in the South Bronx, Community District 7, which is one of the poorest congressional districts in the United States. In that work, in ADS, kind of a little background, I would say about 90% of the population identifies as first generation, 10 to 15% are undocumented, and about 35 to 40% have at least one parent that is undocumented. So when I first started there, I was working with the junior class and really charged with building a college office. In doing all of this, I realized that there isn't a lot of resources on how to advise these type of families. And so because of that, I applied and spoke at the 2023 NACAC Power of Us on advising undocumented mixed status families. Then the next year, the federal government botched the upheaval of the FAFSA Simplification Act. And these families had to fill out paper FAFSAs. They went through a gruesome, identity verification process. And because of that, I felt like, okay, these are things that counselors need to know. So I presented at the NACAC, Guiding the Way into Inclusion, on navigating the financial aid process with families with non-traditional tax situations. That year, I also transitioned into my role at Columbia Secondary School for Math, Science, and Engineering in Community District 5 in Harlem, New York. And then this past application season, I was a reader for UC Berkeley International Student Applications, which was an experience. And I have a new gratitude for admission counselors because that is not easy work at all. So this is kind of the context in which my work is rooted in. So Community District 7 and Community District 5, so very similar racial and ethnic backgrounds. 65% of persons speak a language other than English at home. Very similar poverty, income, educational attainments. So you're really looking at some of the most disadvantaged youth in the country. So what does it mean to be undocumented? So undocumented immigrants are individuals who have entered the United States without any inspection or entered the United States with valid visas that have expired. So undocumented could be asylum seekers, they could be refugees, they could have work-only social security numbers, they could be on their pathway to permanent residency. So one of the questions in the Google form said, well, I'm finding out that certain undocumented students are eligible for aid while others aren't. And that's because undocumented is just an umbrella term. And we'll talk more about who is eligible and who isn't later on in the presentation. And what does it mean to come from a mixed status family? So a mixed status family is a family whose members include people with different citizenship or immigration statuses. So this is a little true or false. You could put it in the chat. It's going to be like a sentence. Put in the chat if you think it's true, if you think it's false. And then these are things that we're going to answer in the presentation. Okay. So undocumented students are eligible for federal aid. And I'll give like maybe a minute. The chat has stopped. I'm gonna go on to the next one. So undocumented students in every state are eligible for in-state tuition if they graduate from an in-state high school. See, it stopped a little bit, so I'm gonna go on to the third one. The documentation status of a parent or guardian affects the financial aid eligibility of the student. Okay. So just keep this in mind, keep your responses in mind, and these will be answered in the presentation. Okay, so first, creating an inclusive school community and college going culture, right? So what does it mean for a school culture to be inclusive? So this means providing information to staff about the types of undocumented students, and whole school trainings to raise collective knowledge. So the truth is that students aren't just talking to their counselors about their status, about what they want to do after they graduate, about what's happening in their life. They're talking to other members of the community. So it's really important for us to expand collective knowledge. It's easy for counseling offices, especially, to be kind of the keepers of this knowledge. But in order to best support the student, in order for to have like an inclusive school culture, think about the community as a whole. And this means refusing to tolerate derogatory or anti-immigration jokes, discouraging staff from assuming, the worst of immigrants, not over-interrogating students to real details of their immigration status. This is important and kind of a theme. These are traumatic events, you know what I mean? You don't want to push too hard because it could mean that the student shuts down. And avoid exclusion language that creates barriers. So something that said a lot is FAFSA is mandatory. Well, if I was a student who was not eligible to fill out FAFSA and I heard that FAFSA was mandatory, that might discourage me from applying because, oh, well, my counselor is saying this is mandatory and I can't do it, so I can't go to college. So really thinking about the language that you're using and communicating to students. So creating an undocumented friendly college going culture. Asking yourself, when you're promoting college applications and scholarship resources, am I considering what undocumented students can apply for? So really going through that extracurricular activities list that you have, that scholarship, and looking at the opportunities that documented versus undocumented students can apply for. Being sure to modify language when discussing financial aid. So some of the financial aid language on college websites, on brochures, unlike the federal government, they're still using alien, illegal, and it's important not to like mimic that language when you're communicating with the students. Not forcing students to write about migration journeys and personal statements or any supplemental essays. It's their story, and if they don't want to tell it, then they do not want to tell it. Undocumented alumni in all college exposure events, becoming a trusted community member by getting to know students and families outside of college-related events. And in that same light, attending parent teachers and providing relevant information in languages that are specific to your student population. So I think maybe this is, I think that when say like bilingual or dual language, a lot of times the default is English and Spanish, but there are a lot of other languages in which students can be undocumented and speak. So in thinking about creating safe spaces, so this is the CSS College office. It's a very big space. We are extremely blessed. My last counseling office was maybe an eighth of this, and it had 4 people in it. So I understand that this may not be possible, but something that I feel can be possible is kind of the energy of the space. So here we do not have any overhead lighting. We don't believe in that. It's all lamps. You can see there's lots of color here. The students are playing Uno. There are college posters, like college pennants. There are, you know, school posters, flyers, student art. Like we have a diffuser, you know, that's the physicality of the space. But when you're thinking about safe, you're thinking about really behavior and interactions. So when you want to create a safe space, you want to think about having clear and consistent core values and group norms. So this is the behavior that is allowed in the space. This is the behavior that is not allowed in the space. A clear conflict resolution process, so that when a conflict does arise in the office, whether it's like student to student or, you know, student to counselor, counselor to student, that there's a clear process that is going to get addressed. Self-directed to support autonomy and empowerment. So that blue grid on the board, that's a calendar, and it has all the dates of the month. So if a student says, hey, well, when is this application due? We say, well, go look at the calendar. And something like that is how you support a student's autonomy. Something that initially when I started counseling, I thought to be a good counselor, to be someone that a student, you know, will go to, I had to be the person that answers and fixes every single one of their problems, whether that was like a personal or on an academic level. So it's, hey, why do I have a P for my drama class? And it's like, you know what, I'm gonna figure that out for you. But now it's, you know what, you should ask the school counselor that, or you should ask the AP in charge of programming. And so that student knows that they can come to me and I can help them figure it out, but also supporting their own autonomy and their own self-advocacy skills. So when you think safe, think about behaviors and interactions that you're allowing in your space. Okay, so you've created the safe space. Kids are piling in. They love Uno. They love you. But how do you determine if a student is undocumented? How do you determine if a parent is undocumented? Okay, so signs that a student or a parent or guardian may be undocumented. So maybe the parent is unresponsive or avoidant when asked about their job or income. Students provides consistent excuses as to why they forgot their social security number at home. Parent is resistant to providing federal state tax identification. Student avoids meeting about college, maybe communicates that they don't want to attend. It's super important to understand that all of this is rooted in fear, especially in what's going on right now. And if you've had little interactions with the student or parent, they see you as part of the system. And unfortunately, this system is anti-family. And so when you're working with this population, it's really about practicing empathy and sometimes radical empathy to really understand and place yourself in their shoes. Okay, so actionable steps, right? So calling them, having a family meeting. Sometimes that's not possible. A lot of times these families are working 2-3 jobs. But in the if they do file taxes and you do get a hold of their taxes, if the parent or student social security number starts with a 9, then that student and or parent isn't documented. There is a caveat to that, which we'll go over later in the presentation. But if it starts with a 9, then that's not a social security number. Linked is a QR code for the eligible non-citizens. And again, going back to that question about, well, some undocumented students are eligible, others aren't. That page is clear in the sense that if they have a visa status or they have documentation that is not listed as considered to be an eligible non-citizen, then they're not eligible. There's no really like gray area with that. So it's really important to understand kind of each student's specific situation. And we kind of talk more we'll talk more about later in the presentation about how to gather all of that information. Okay, so you have a documented student and an undocumented parent and guardian. What does that mean? So essentially proceed as normal. They can apply for FAFSA, they can fill out the census profile, they qualify for in-state aid. Now, filling out the 2024 to 2025 FAFSA with an undocumented parent or guardian. So before we get into that, I want to get into like what you need for the college financial aid application. So a lot of the times the language surrounding the financial aid application requirements is, well, we just need your tax returns. Just bring your tax returns and that's it. A lot more when you're working with this type of community. So yes, you need the 1040, right? If they don't have a 1040, if they didn't file taxes, they need a 4506T. They can only get a 4506T if they have an I-10. They can only get an I-10 if they have proper documentation or identity documentation from their home country, right? So sometimes they don't have the 1040 and they can't get the 4506T. And if that's the case, that's a lot of phone calls that you have to make. You need the parent IT 201, the W-2, if they are self-employed, then they have a 1099. You need the public assistant budget letter, Social Security income benefit letter. This is specific to New York State. I'm not sure how it is in other states, but parents need a New York State driver's license or a New York State non-driver's ID card for identity verification. A lot of parents will have a New York City non-driver's ID card, but that's not enough for identity verification. They need that New York State non-driver's ID or a driver's license. You need a student birth certificate. This is super important because, you know, when you have 2 to 3 last names, sometimes a student is registered in the system using only one name, or, you know, they're missing the dash, or the student doesn't use that second last name. When it comes to like identity verification, everything has to look the same. So you need the student birth certificate. You need that social security card. You need that permanent residence card because you really need to see and make sure that you're inputting all the information correctly and it all looks the same. Another reason why you need a parent and student social security card is because if a parent or student has a work-only social security number, then if they file taxes, it's going to look like a standard social security number. So it's not going to look like a 9. It's not going to start with a 9. The only way to figure that out, if it's valid, is if it's a standard social security number, I should say, is if you have the social security card itself, right? Because a work-only social security numbers, if a student has a work-only social security number, they're not eligible for federal aid. So you may initially look at their taxes and say, oh, well, this one starts with a 3, this one starts with a 2, they're good to go. But that may not be the case. So it's very important that you have a copy of their actual social security card. And then the student permanent residence card or any other visa that they may have. Okay. So the first thing that's going to happen is the student is going to invite the parent. Okay. They're going to invite the parent and then they're going to click my parent doesn't have an SSN, right? And they're just going to send the invite. When they click my parent doesn't have an SSN, it's going to ask them to put a mailing address. So you just put the mailing address and send the invite. The parent is going to receive an email, right? This is what the email is going to look like. They're not going to see this on their FSA account if they do have one. They're just going to receive this email. They're going to click get started and log into the FSA account that they have, or they will create an account. I'm going to pause there. So when you create an account, right, do not enter the I-10 in the SSN field. An I-10 is that digit that starts with 9 that they use to file for taxes. It is not a social security number. And if you put the I-10 in the SSN field, it's gonna be a very complicated process to undo that. So when creating the account, if the parent does not already have the account, if they have an I-10, that's fine, but they do not have a social security number, so don't put it in the social security number box. After they've created their account, they will need to manually enter their financial information, all right? For the identity verification part, parents without social security numbers will answer knowledge-based questions, which is generated by TransUnion. If a parent's identity cannot be verified, then their account is going to be limited, but they can still fill out the FAFSA form. This is different than last year. Last year, if a parent's identity wasn't verified, then they had to submit all of their identity documentation to this federal government watched email and just hope that within a few weeks they get verified. That email address used for verification is being paused for right now. So if the account is created but not verified, but their identity is not verified, they can still sign and submit the FAFSA form. Now, in the FAFSA form, it is going to ask for their I-10. That is when you put the I-10 number. But you don't put the I-10 number in the Social Security number box when a student sends the invite, and you don't put it in when you're creating an account. But once you're in the form and ask for an I-10, you can put the I-10 number. And this is just kind of reiterating what I said. Everything needs to match their legal documents. So what's on their social security number, what's on their tax returns, everything has to look the same. All right, so for financial aid options for undocumented students. So undocumented students are not eligible for FAFSA. They can fill out the CSS profile. And then in terms of in-state financial aid, it kind of depends. So here is another QR code on a map that highlights the in-state tuition policies for undocumented students for all the 50 states. So depending on where you're at, it'll clearly say like, yes, they are, no, they're not, or yes, but, or no, but. So I'll give that like a few seconds so y'all can grab that. So US colleges that meet 100% of demonstrated need for undocumented and DACA students. So this is another QR code that will show you the full list of US colleges that meet 100% of demonstrated need. A lot of these, unfortunately, are like that have the lower admission rates. And I'll give you all a second to. Okay. Student scenarios. So this is not a turn and talk. I'm gonna give a scenario, and you can put the answer in the chat. If you're feeling shy, I understand. I probably wouldn't put anything in the chat either. But I encourage you to take out a pen and paper, pull up your notes app and write down your responses to these. And I'll give 5 minutes. Let me put on my timer. Okay. All right, so Vanessa Hernandez is a senior in a New York City high school. Throughout her 4 years, she played volleyball, participated in multiple STEP academies, took credit-bearing college courses, and volunteered as a laboratory assistant in the science lab. Teachers describe her as empathetic, adaptable, and collaborative. Vanessa is interested in STEM. She is undocumented. When you call her parents for their tax returns, Dad informs you that he is also undocumented. He did not file taxes because he receives workers' compensation for an injury suffered on the job last year. Vanessa is a 95% GPA student who has taken the most academic rigorous coursework available at the high school. So as her college counselor, as her school counselor, what are 3 to 5 private colleges or universities you would advise her to apply for? We have about 2 minutes left. Okay, we're back. I'm trying to do the same thing. Oh, ooh, back. Okay, so some of the institutions I chose were Smith College, Swarthmore, U Rochester, Wellesley. This is because it's a wide range of schools. You have a women's school, you have liberal arts schools, you have research institutions. They're all about 3 to 4 hours away from New York City. But most importantly is they all have undocumented student centers on campus. And this kind of gets into what does it mean for a campus to be undocumented friendly. Schools that read undocumented students as domestic applicants as opposed to international students. Schools and states that offer in-state tuition to undocumented students, need-based financial aid for undocumented students, and sanctuary campuses. So campuses that will not enforce federal enforcement, will not essentially allow ICE to come on campus. And then thinking about like dreamer language, so undocumented student as opposed to like alien or using language as regardless of citizenship status. So it's important that when you're building these college lists, you're really doing it with intentionality. This is the second student scenario, a little bit different type of student. So Jorge Garcia is a senior at your high school. He struggled socio-emotionally 4 years of high school and did not connect with his teachers. Regardless, Jorge played varsity basketball for 2 years and participated in the Culinary Arts Club for 1 year. His mom, Juana, brought in her taxes along with her work-only Social Security number. She's a house attendant who makes under the 2-member household poverty line amount. You notice that the Social Security number next to George's name starts with a 9. George is a 74% GPA student who has taken no honors or AP classes. So in a situation like that, what are his post-secondary options? And I'm going to give you 5 minutes. About 2 minutes left. But that was an accident, but it's been 4 minutes. Um, so our what I would advise the student is to look at Per Scholas, which is a vocational trade school program. I believe it's national. Co-op Tech, which is for the culinary arts, construction. There's a tech aspect to it. CUNY, which is the City University of New York. So the 2-year programs that they have, and the adult learning resources that they provide, and then same with the SUNY EOC as well. So I wanted to talk about what's going on right now in the higher ed landscape and kind of how does that affect our work. So on the higher ed side, the Department of Education. What is the Department of Education? So the DOE makes up about 4% of all federal funding. They provide funding for Title I schools, special education funds, Pell Grant, FSEOG, Teach, TRIO. They also conduct research and data transparency. So when you think about how countries are ranked in terms of their educational level, that's the Department of Education that gathers that. So to shutter the whole Department of Education, which is what 47 has outright said, requires an act of Congress, which at this point, considering everything that's been going on, he might get it. But most likely he's going to change how schools and colleges deal with issues of race and gender. So most recently on Friday, the DOE's Office for Civil Rights warned in a letter to higher education institutions that it would penalize schools that consider race in scholarships, hiring, and other activities by withholding federal funding. So the very specific language they said is using race in decisions pertaining to admissions, hiring, promotion, compensation, financial aid, scholarship, prizes, administrative support, discipline, housing, graduation ceremonies, and all other aspects of student academic and campus life. They have 14 days to respond to this. And in this letter, he also announced that he canceled 600 million in grants focused on training teachers in, quote, inappropriate, unnecessary topics, end quote, such as critical race theory, social justice, activism, anti-racism, and instruction on white privilege. This was as of Friday. Every day it seems like something new is happening. And it's like, okay, so how does this affect us on the other side of the desk? So the National College Attainment Network, and I copied and pasted their email because I think it's important that if you haven't read this, then you do. So the National College Attainment Network, which is like an umbrella organization that really provides resources to these types of families, sent out an email stating that although the Higher Education Act prohibits the use of data for any purpose other than determining and awarding federal financial assistance, they cannot assure that mixed status students and families, that data that's submitted to the Department of Education as part of the FAFSA process will continue to be protected. So essentially what this email is saying is that if a documented student applies for FAFSA, invites their undocumented parent, that undocumented parent self-discloses that they're undocumented, before that information wouldn't have been used for anything else other than for the financial aid process. But because of this current administration, they cannot say definitively that information won't be used for punitive measures later on. And this was a very hard email to read. I think it was probably a very sad day in the office having to send this. So if there's anyone on, the National College Attainment Network here, I know this was hard to send. But I was kind of, after reading this, I was left with, wow, like, so we either, like, can we live with the possibility that one of our students will be, or one of our students' parents will be deported because we advise them to apply for financial aid? Or do we doom the next generation of students to poverty? Two very different extremes. But that's a really hard question. And I think it's what a lot of counselors are asking themselves in some way, shape, or form. Our responsibility is, our job is to provide families and students all the resources that they need to make the most informed decision that they can, regardless of whether or not we agree with that decision. And that's the reality of kind of where we're at right now. There was a question in the Google forum about how can we provide equitable resources to undocumented students when they can't even travel to other states, and we can't. The system isn't designed for that. The system's actively being changed every day to prevent that even further from happening. What we can do is have honest and frank conversations with students from the very beginning on what their process is going to look like, on what it's going to need to take on their end and our end to get them to that final goal, including them in those conversations about them, and speaking to them like an equal, not coaching them. What we can do is build college lists with intentionality. College lists, in my opinion, are the most important aspect of a college application process. It is the baseline, the foundation. If you don't have a good college list, then like that is the start of the process, and what we can do is what y'all are doing right now. Like, it is the end of a workday if you're on the West Coast. On the East Coast, it's 7 p.m. For those of us on midwinter break, we're on break, and we're here. We're here because we're committed to doing the work. So I don't want to hear that you are doing this alone, because you are not. We are doing this together. Everyone on this webinar is your community. I am your community. Allow me to be a resource. Allow all of us to be resources. In the next 4 years, it's going to be rough. It's going to be a hard 4 years. But we have each other. As cliche as that sounds, my contact information will be at the end of this. But yeah, like, lean into your community, ask questions, attend these webinars. It's going to be a lot of work, but if we're here, we're dedicated to the work, and that is 90% of it. Okay, and on that light, providing some resources. So these are some immigrant-led organizations and advocacy groups. So United We Dream, Immigrants Rising in Schools, Undocumented Black, Cosecha, United We Dream. And then there were a few questions in the Google forum about post-graduation opportunities for undocumented students. So like, where can they work after they graduate? Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information out there just in general. I found that Rutgers, the Camden Career Center, and then Northwestern's Career Advancement websites both have really good resources on what undocumented students can do after they've graduated. The higher ed immigration portal, immigrant portal also has some resources. And this is a link to dreamer-friendly companies, meaning they signed this like pro-DACA amicus brief submitted to the Supreme Court or their Dream.us employer partner. This is from 2020 though. That's very, very important. This is from 2020. This is the most up-to-date list I could find. So I think it would be a good starting point for students to look at some of these websites and still see if they are still friendly to undocumented students or DACA students. And that is it. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't yap too much, and I hope y'all learned something. That is the goal. If you have any, I'm gonna do a live Q&A. I think we have some time for that. But that is also my email. If you have any more student-specific questions or maybe something that you don't want to like talk about in the presentation, I look at my email every 5 minutes, so it definitely will be answered, I promise. But I don't know if you want to start asking the
Yeah, definitely. I think I speak for everyone, and I'm seeing so many comments flood the chat, just kind of thanking you, Anna, for your resources, your expertise, but also just kind of the reminder that we all needed that these are really, really difficult times for our students, our communities, and also for us as kind of support systems. And yeah, I also just underscore and echo the power of community. And so I hope that you all reach out to Anna if I can be supportive in any sort of way, particularly with regards to kind of questions of supporting undocumented students while they're in college and while they're developing kind of career pathways and plans. Please do feel free to reach out. We did get a couple of different questions, Anna, in the chat. And so one of the questions that came up is a little bit more of a logistical question when you were talking about undocumented students being unable to submit the FAFSA, but they are able to submit the CSS profile. Do you know if there's any reasoning behind that or any context behind why they are able to submit CSS and not FAFSA?
Yes, FAFSA is federally funded and CSS is for institutional aid. So institutional meaning the schools themselves. So the aid is coming from their endowment versus like the federal government.
Yep. Amazing. And then, so when you were talking about schools that have undocumented student centers or communities, someone had asked if you think that this is potentially a center that could be targeted by the government in the future and something to kind of be weary of when it comes to advising students in that particular direction.
Yeah, I do think everything is up for grabs at this point. The language in the last in that letter that they sent higher education institutions, it pretty much targeted everything. I'm like part of a historically Latina sorority. And so I was looking at also through that lens, like, oh, that's multicultural Greek life. That is like the Latinx Student Union. I think at this point, everything is on the table. And you do have to definitely consider that when you're thinking about post-secondary options and like building that college list for students.
Yeah, definitely. This is a question that came into our Q&A box anonymously, but I'm sure this is something that you'd encourage them to reach out directly about. But the comment says, I'm working with a very high achieving undocumented student born in Nigeria who lives in Texas. She has been admitted to UT Austin, which is the top public university in the state. She is guaranteed the cost of tuition there due to her being low income, but they're struggling to find money for room and board. Do you have any ideas on kind of funding or scholarship opportunities for kind of those extras or other components of college?
If you send me an email, there is an internal scholarship spreadsheet that me and Samuel Reyes, who's the other college counselor at CSS, also great college counselor, great resource if you ever meet him. We've been kind of internally developing that I could share with you.
Amazing. Amy asks, what options do undocumented students who have a social security number beginning with 9 have in terms of work in the US?
So that is an ITIN number. So ITIN, you can So a lot of what the resources are speaking on in terms of working after they graduate, the basis is that they have an I-10. So having an I-10 is like a step forward in being able to work. So as long as they have their I-10, they should be good, quote unquote, because they can use that to file taxes and yeah, they can use that to file taxes and they'll get a W-2 and all of that stuff.
Amazing, thanks. Um, Anna, what kinds of trends are you seeing maybe at your school across the 2025 admissions process? This attendee says that they're seeing a sheer drop in number of applications for financial aid in California.
Well, Kathy Hochul, who's the governor of New York, actually just is doing almost a mandatory FAFSA's mandatory for everyone push. So we are kind of seeing an uptick just because of that, because now everyone has to apply for FAFSA if they are eligible. So I don't think I have seen that trend.
Got it. And the last question I think we have, unless I'm missing any in the chat, Natalia asks, how would you advise a person interested in joining the field of college counseling at a time like this?
Prepare yourself. No. I would say let's talk. I think we need more counselors that are doing the work. I think like the statistic is the average school counselor has like a 300 student caseload. You know what I mean? The more people that we have that are really committed to doing the work, the better, the better it's going to be, the better the college landscape is going to get. I don't think any one of my friends are in education. I always tell them, I'm like, come to the other side, come on. So I do think, although it's rough, it's kind of always going to be rough. It's just, it looks more rough now. But I would still definitely encourage you to get involved as much as you can, even if it's not in like an official capacity.
Yeah, definitely. To add in my 2 cents, one of my favorite LinkedIn posts that I've seen just kind of talking about the situation is just very simply said, like, none of us went into this field because the work is easy. It was never easy. Now it's harder, but it's always been hard. And I think we've always found a way to and through. And I think that that's something to hold close. It's just a little extra work. We did get one more question from Esther. I teach in a graduate counseling program, and many of my grad students who are working in public high school offices report that every conversation they have with students about college ends with, why should I apply for college when they're coming after me? Or should I ask my undocumented parents to complete the FAFSA? What are any talking points that you can offer?
I think that validate what they're feeling, regardless what your beliefs are, whatever they're feeling is super valid, and they have to know that you understand that. I would say that talk to them about options, like talk to them about what life after high school would look like if they did not go to college. You know, the ramifications of not applying for like the Pell Grant, or in New York, the TAP grant. I think this idea of like adultification. So like a lot of these times, these kids of immigrants or like in low income households, they are adultified. So they are translators. They are the cultural, they're the in-between, you know what I mean? From the immigrants, like that immigrant mentality to like kind of what's going on. And I guess that's all to say, these kids are adults. And when you're having these conversations with them, treat them like adults. Because a lot of the times they're working, they're paying bills. Like they are like translating bank statements for their families. Like these are adults and you have to treat them like that to a certain aspect. So it's really just about being as honest as you can, and providing them, which is as many options as they possibly can. And doing it regardless of how you feel. I think the hardest part of counseling in general is practicing radical empathy. So empathy without conditions. And when you're thinking about this and you're doing this work and thinking about your own values and your own morals, and like going to college changed my life. You know what I mean? Both my parents don't have college degrees. So like going to college changed the trajectory of my life. But that was my path, and that may not be everyone else's path. So although the conversation is very hard, especially if, like you do not coach them, like do not try to convince them. It's very much like these are your options, and I'm going to support you regardless. And they really need to know that, because what you don't want to happen is that you're like pushing your own agenda or pushing what you believe should be their path, and they shut down. And now they're for sure not pursuing anything because they feel that pressure. So I think my one piece of advice would just be as honest with them as possible, and make sure that they know that you're going to support them regardless.
Yeah, definitely. I underscore that. And I think also just like acknowledging and validating the really hard parts of this. I think the line between maintaining hope and optimism and like toxic positivity that risks invalidating students is very, very thin. And so just making sure you're on kind of the right side of that line. You're so welcome, Esther. Amazing. I think that's it in terms of the questions that we've got in the chat and the Q&A. So I think I speak for everyone that was here tonight in truly thanking you so much, Anna, for your time and for the work you've put in compiling all of these resources. Like I had mentioned to everyone at the beginning of the session, the recording and any associated resources will be sent out to you all via email, as well as a copy of Anna's email address. So you all can feel free to reach out at any time. And I swear I did not put Anna up to this, but she very skillfully said that one of the biggest components of college advising work is really creating that strong college list. And so I really encourage you all to join us next month for our session on building an FGLI friendly college list, hosted by two wonderful guests. And you should be getting some information on that via email very, very soon. So we hope to see you all next month. Anna, thank you so much again. And yeah, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your nights and rest of your school year. Thanks, everyone.